Congratulations, you are now under contract on a property. Just don't get too excited yet because there's going to be a lot of things that occur from now until the time we get to the closing table. So right away, you're going to start to notice a few things happening. The first thing is you're going to hear from my transaction manager, and she's going to give you a copy of the fully signed contract. She's also going to share that contract with your attorney as well as your lender to make sure that our whole side of the transaction are all in synergy with each other. The second part is she's going to send out an introduction to all parties email, which is going to fuse together the buy side and the sell side of the transaction to ensure that everyone's on the same page and everyone knows exactly what the deadlines are and what to expect from this point moving forward. One other thing you're going to notice is you're going to have an email come out from my real estate attorney. And you're going to have to sign a retainer agreement for their fee, and that fee will only be charged upon a successful closing. This is also a good time if you have any legal questions about the transaction for you to hop on a phone call and get those questions answered. So once we get you squared away with your attorney, as well as getting you connected with our transaction manager, now there's two important things that are going to happen over the next 5 business days. The first thing is we're going to need to know where your initial earnest money is going to be deposited and how much it's going to be deposited. This is typically going to be somewhere between $1,000 and $5,000, depending on how competitive that offer was. This money is typically either wired or it's sent by way of a personal check and deposited at the listing agent's brokerage in a non-interest bearing account. Keep in mind when you're closing on a property, there are closing costs. So your earnest money is going to sit in this non-interest bearing account all the way up until the day of closing or the day before, and then that money is going to be wired to the title company, which effectively is going to reduce your overall cash to close. A lot of people ask me, is the earnest money in addition to our down payment and our closing costs? And just know that when we're talking about how much it costs to buy a home, in the example of you putting 20% down, there's usually going to be about 2 to 2.5% of closing costs, and your earnest money is going to be part of that overall amount. Once your earnest money is deposited, we're going to have a receipt. You're going to send that off to your lender to make sure that they have a copy as well. So after we get your earnest money squared away, we want to ensure that we get your inspection scheduled. I have a preferred inspector that I've been working with for years. At this time, usually I'll reach out to them, see what their availability is, and to make sure that we can find a suitable time within the parameter of the first 5 business days, because per the contract, it is required that we actually get an inspection done and we send out an attorney modification letter within that first 5 business days. Your inspection is actually the first of about 5 different contingencies that occur in the under contract to close process. So now we have your inspection scheduled. This is the time where I encourage people to bring your tape measures. If you have any family members or friends that want to see the property, this is usually when you're going to be spending the most amount of time in the property between now and actually you owning the home itself. And the reason is because in the showing, you're typically there for 10, 15 minutes. You don't have a lot of time to really soak it in and to be there and look around. Usually an inspection is going to last somewhere between 1 hour and 2 hours long, if not a little bit longer. So this is that opportunity if you need to measure for furniture, you need to know different details about the property prior to closing so that you can arrange and pre-plan and make sure that you're prepared. This is going to be the best time to do so. It's important to understand that the inspection is there to really cover 2 different things. These 2 different things are going to be anything that's a material defect in a property or anything that's a health and safety issue. Just some quick examples of that. A material defect would be, let's say at the time of the inspection, your furnace was inoperable. That is technically a material defect. We can negotiate or ask the seller to fix that prior to closing. The other thing would be something that's a health and safety issue. A lot of times we see this in relation to an electrical panel, or sometimes there's different types of water intrusion that has led to mold or different types of fungi growth. If any of these type of things, material or health and safety issues, if they present themselves, we have the right to actually negotiate those, and for whatever reason, if we can't come to terms, you are protected by the inspection contingency. You can cancel or terminate the contract and get your initial earnest money fully refunded. Within about 24 hours, you're going to receive your inspection report back, and don't worry, it's going to be a very detailed and thorough report, but we're going to make sure that we hop on a phone call together to understand what's most important and what should be some of the concerns that we can put forth to the seller. This process will usually end up in 3 different categories. The first category is going to be anything that we want the seller to repair or replace prior to closing. The second category is anything that we may want to ask for a credit for. And the third category is going to be an additional information section, and this is just kind of a catch-all for any additional questions that we may have. Once we understand those 3 different sections of the inspection report, we're going to compile that into an email that we're going to send to your attorney so that they can add that language to the attorney modification letter. When that attorney modification draft is prepared, you're going to approve that, and once approved, we'll send that off to the other side. Now, don't be alarmed, but this is gonna be the time if a deal is ever gonna hit the fan and things are gonna fall apart, it's usually gonna be in the next 24 hours. So once you submit your inspection request and our attorney modification letter, this is gonna be when the sell side is gonna be reviewing this and deciding how they wanna respond back to us. Now, if anything is ever gonna kill a deal, it's usually gonna happen right around this time frame of the transaction. The reason is because you're now putting together a list of concerns and a list of items that you want the seller to take care of prior to closing, and the seller is deciding what they want to agree to and what they want you to say that you can handle after closing. And so if anything is going to ruffle a feather, it's usually going to be within this time frame, and I like to mention that up front so that you can expect it and you can set expectations properly. I've seen attorney review last as short as a day and as much as a couple months. So this process is really where we're going to go back and forth, and we're going to figure out what is going to be a win-win for the buyer and the seller. Right at the same time that we're negotiating the attorney modification letter, we're going to start receiving all of the different condo documents. Of course, if you're buying a single family home, these won't apply, but in a lot of different areas in Chicago, you're going to have some type of condo docs. This is going to be things such as the declaration and bylaws, the budget, this is going to be the meeting minutes for the building, rules and regulations, just to name a few. This is going to be your opportunity and technically the second contingency of the under contract process, which is the opportunity to review and approve a condo doc, and you have 5 business days to do so. This is a really important part of the process because this is going to give us a look under the hood of how the association is being managed. So by having things such as the meeting minutes, we can see the last time the board and the association met, what are the things that they talked about. This could include things as different projects that are coming down the pipeline that they're thinking about budgeting for. This could be any litigation or any lawsuits that are happening within the association. And this just might be general changes in the rules and regulations or different amendments that might be on the table. For whatever reason, if we do not like something that we find and we try to negotiate that with the seller and we can't come to an agreement, either party, the buyer or the seller, can terminate the contract and you'll get your initial earnest money back refunded in full. The next contingency, and contingency number 3, is going to be your appraisal contingency. Now, if you're buying cash, this is not going to apply. However, if you're obtaining financing from a lender, your lender is going to order the appraisal, and the appraiser is going to meet the listing agent at the property, and their job there is to make sure that the property appraises either at or above contract value. Let's just say you're under contract at $750,000 and the appraisal comes in at $725,000. Well, the lender's not going to give you a loan on $750,000 because they're saying the fair market value is actually only $725,000. So now you have a $25,000 gap. And really there's 3 things that can happen in this situation. Usually the property appraises out, but in the case that it doesn't, here's one of 3 things that could happen, which is the first, the buyer comes up with the difference, so they get the loan for $725,000, but then they have to actually come up with cash for the additional $25,000 to bridge the gap. Another way you can get around this is by working with your lender to adjust your loan to value so that you can make up the difference of that $25,000 gap. The second option is the seller can actually come down to match the appraised value. So in that instance, they're taking $25,000 less, and they're now under contract at the appraised value versus the initial contract price. And then the third option, which I rarely see, but it can happen, is the buyer and seller agree to split the difference. If one of these options is not agreed upon, once again, either you or the seller can back out of that transaction and you can get your earnest money refunded in full. Right around the same time of appraisal, we're likely going to be closing out of attorney review. And one of the next terms that you have to satisfy as the buyer is you need to submit your balance of earnest money. A lot of times this is going to be 5% of the purchase price minus your initial earnest money. So this is often going to be a big balance, right? So if this is 5% on a $600,000, $700,000 property, you can see this is a significant chunk of money. So when we submit this money, this is kind of the last point of the process where I'm going to make sure that you want to proceed forward. So as soon as that balance of earnest money gets wired or deposited, yes, there are still different times. And just like your initial earnest money, this is typically sent in either by a cashier's check or a wire. All right, so we're almost there, I promise you. So at this point in the process, we've agreed on all of the inspection and attorney items. We've had the chance to review and approve all of the condo documents. The property has appraised at value, and you've deposited your balance of earnest money. So now is what I like to call the dead period. And this is basically where my job as your agent is kind of done at this point. And we're just sitting around and we're waiting for your 4th of your 5th contingency of this process, which is your mortgage contingency. During this time, it's incredibly important for you to be in close communication with your lender and your attorney so that if there's any outstanding documents or anything that they need to get you approved, that we're getting that to them in a timely manner. Another thing you want to be very careful of is this is the time where you don't want to open up any new lines of credit. You don't want to make any significant purchases. A lot of times I see people buy, really expensive blinds and they put it on a credit card, or maybe they go buy a new car or they change jobs. These are all things that will completely blow up your deal. So if there's ever a time to just wait a little bit longer, this is the time to do so. So now we're going to work through this until your lender is going to issue the famous words and what we're all looking for and anticipating, known as your clear to close. You've probably heard this term before, but if not, this basically means that you are now satisfying the fourth of the fifth contingency of the process, which is the mortgage contingency. As soon as we have approval on the loan, at this point, you are pretty much buying this property unless something significant happens. So at this point, let's just say the day before the closing, you decide, hey, I no longer want to buy this home. I just had a second opinion and I want to walk away from the deal. Well, unfortunately at this time, you don't have a contingency to fall back on and you're at risk of losing all your earnest money if you were to walk away from the deal. So before we get you to your approval, we want to double check and make sure that, hey, this is going to be very real at this point. From this point forward, there's no going back, and we all need to make sure we're on the same page. So we've made it to the night before the closing or the morning of, and we just have one more thing that we need to do, which is your final walkthrough. Your final walkthrough is not a technical contingency in the process. However, I do call this the fifth contingency. The reason is for some reason, if you go for your final walkthrough and the property is not in the condition you expect it to be prior to closing, you do not have to close on that home. Some examples of this that I've seen in the past is during the negotiation, we agreed on all the TVs staying at the transfer of the sale. And for some reason at the final walkthrough, all the TVs are gone. That can create an issue. Another example is the seller has movers and the mover puts a huge hole in the wall. If a situation like this presents itself, technically you don't have to close on that home, but usually what we see is some sort of agreement happen at the closing table. Because at this point, it's closing day, everyone is equally as motivated to get the property sold. All right, so the final walkthrough went great. Now we're heading to the closing table. So what you can expect here is you're gonna wanna bring two things. First thing you're gonna wanna bring is your ID. The second thing is going to be a check for your balance of your cash to close. This balance is going to be provided usually the day before or a couple days before by your lender. The other thing is you're going to be meeting your attorney and the title company closer there. You're going to run through all of your loan docs, all of your different condo documents with your attorney, and you're going to sign off and initial on all of those. Once you're done signing all your documents, we're just going to be waiting for the last thing that we want to hear, which is the fact that the deal has been funded. You now own this property, you're gonna get the keys at the closing table and you can move in that day. I hope by taking the time to watch these videos, you feel more confident and clear about what it takes to purchase a home here in the Chicago real estate market. If I can answer any other questions or be a resource in any way, just feel free to reach out and we look forward to serving you with your real estate goals.